Meat prices are continuing to go up, and people have noticed, and it's hitting the carnivore community especially hard since that's pretty much all we eat, right? But that hasn't stopped people from eating more red meat now than they have since the 1980s, and that's a good thing, given what we know about how nutritious red meat actually is. But what are the reasons for meat prices to continue to go up as they have been? Today, I'll attempt to go over that for you in a way that makes it understandable for the typical person who doesn't have a mind for public policy, though I'm not going to cover all the reasons in this video. There are many, many interconnected reasons for meat getting so much more expensive than it has been. So this will be the first part of an ongoing series on the price increases for meat. I'm Dr. Anthony P. Stein, the Practical Carnivore. I've lost 133 pounds doing keto and carnivore, and my PhD is in sustainable development, public policy, and I took a special interest in food, among other topics. And I'm going to put those skills to use here to help you navigate as a carnivore these stormy economic waters. So let's get into the video. The first reason for food prices to go up isn't really that surprising. Corn prices are high, and they're only going to get higher due to the consequences of international events, among other issues. This story comes from agweb.com and their Market Watch section. Headline: 3 reasons corn prices are staying high. The story was published on May 4th, just a few days ago. Corn prices are high because of fertilizer issues, core ingredients for fertilizer being scarce right now, as well as labor shortages, but there are other reasons as well. Let's see what they are. From the article, quote, what factors are at play? 3 major forces. 1, a shrinking South American crop this year. USDA is calling for record corn production from Brazil. For 2021-2022, the country's corn crop is predicted to hit 116 million metric tons, which is larger than last year's crop by 33%. Yet severe drought conditions are impacting the safrinha corn crop in Brazil, which is in its vegetative state and will be harvested between May and August, end quote. Brazil is experiencing a drought this year, and as one of the world's largest suppliers of corn, that is not a small thing at all, and yields are not going to be what they need to be moving forward. Reason 2 from the article, quote, U.S. planting delays. As of May 1st, USDA estimates 14% of the U.S. corn crop has been planted. That compares to a 5-year average of 33% planted by the 1st of May. Last year, 42% was planted by May 1st. This year's planting pace is the slowest since 2013. The only thing we can say with certainty is we are delayed, Basse says. What late planting means is we have to have a lot of good things happen during the summer growing season. Basse says after May 10th, if the forecast is still preventing significant planting progress, the market will more heavily factor in the ramifications of a late planted crop. I think that's code for expect price increases. On May 9th, if we have 20% to 24% of the corn crop seeded, we will be pushed into a late planted year, he says. The record low is 17% in 1993, end quote. Some of that is due to the weather. I'm in central Oklahoma. We grow a fair amount of corn here, though we are mostly cattle country. And people 2 towns over just had their downtown wiped out by a tornado. The weather has been very wet this season, and while that makes up for some of the dry winter we had, it is wreaking havoc on the planting season. Labor issues factor into this as well, but let's look at reason number 3 from the article, quote, strong margins for ethanol production. There it is. Another positive factor for corn prices is ethanol production, which consumes roughly 40% of the U.S. corn crop and is refined into ethanol. What shocks me, even though we have $8 corn and $17 soybeans, those are bushel prices, we have not seen crush margins or ethanol margins really go into the negative, Basse says. Ethanol producers are still looking for bushels to buy, he says, and bidding aggressively in the cash market. My ethanol plants today are making about 80 cents, Basse says, so they're going to keep bidding for corn, end quote. Corn is one of the key ingredients that goes into most of the cattle feed that's given to cattle raised in the United States. Government energy policies are conflicting with this, causing friction in the form of higher prices for corn. Fuel for our cars and fuel for our bodies are somewhat in conflict, and as the push for fuel alternatives continues into the future, you can expect to see corn prices increase unless we figure out a way to grow more corn. But those aren't the only reasons related to agriculture. There is another reason: centralization and pure greed. This story comes from agriculture.com and was published on the 27th of April. Headline: Cattle market reformers see resistance from big ag groups. Surprised? I'm not surprised at all. The American meat industry is hyper-centralized, with cattle processed at only a handful of processing centers in the U.S. for the most part. Yes, there are small mom-and-pop operations, but the vast majority of cattle are processed in just a handful of places, which some will say helps with efficiency, but also puts cattle ranchers in a bind. But let's look at the article. Quote, our large processors slaughter 4 out of every 5 head of cattle in the United States. With meat prices driving inflation at the grocery store, some cattle producers say that they are paid unfairly low prices because of the market power of the packers. Andy Green, USDA market advisor, said, cow half operators and cattle feeders are left with fewer options for selling their cattle and greater risks of an unfair playing field. Market reform is needed right now, said Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, a longtime advocate of mandatory cash purchases as a method to assure fair prices. Independent cattle producers in the Midwest are being hurt. However, the largest group representing producers, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, announced its opposition to mandatory cash purchases as an infringement of the right to pursue profits. The biggest U.S. farm group said weeks ago that it opposed mandatory cash purchases, as did the meat industry, meaning the meat industry lobbyists. What is being proposed right now concentrates on what works for one region, said NCBA Vice President Ethan Lane in a statement. It simply doesn't work for the rest of the country, end quote. And there it is. Reform infringes on their right to make a profit. And look, I get it. I'm not against making profits at all. But people have noticed that food processing plants are having rather weird accidents right now, and though I don't think it's on purpose, when you look at the track record of the past decade, these older processing plants are having accidents all the time that destroy the places. It happens every year. Just this year is worse than in previous years, but that itself is par for the course for the bad luck the 2020s have represented for everyone so far in all walks of life and in every way imaginable. But it begs a question. Why would you centralize the vast majority of meat processing in 4 plants in the United States? Doesn't that seem short-sighted to anyone besides me? The processing companies are dedicated to protecting their profits, which is understandable, but the profit margins for cattle ranchers are themselves very tight, which is why I advocate buying directly from a rancher if you are able to. And I put my money where my mouth is. I am buying half a cow for my family in the coming weeks. When I get that half cow, I'll have it for you in an unboxing video, like the one I did this past weekend, where I showed you off the bison tomahawks I got. Except this time the quantity of meat will be orders of magnitude larger. It's going to be kind of awesome to look at. Buying from a rancher directly means they're getting the profits directly, and often you're getting a much better price as the consumer. That half cow I'm buying will cost me $4.50 a pound for the meat, and it's grass-fed, grain-finished, completely free of corn or soy, which is great. I highly recommend that you do the same if you can. Now, what did you think about all this, though? Now, I plan to do more examination of the politics of food moving forward so you can understand both the anti-meat forces that are arrayed against us and the reasons why your meat prices are going up. If that sounds interesting to you, hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll have more videos like this in the future. And let me know what you thought of this in the comments section, please. It does help grow channels like this. Until then, have a good meat-filled day.